Give all your thoughts a fighting chance. Ask your fears and doubts. Would you like to dance? And open up your eyes. See the world and let the world see you. Take the time to love the things you do, and you hear it when your spirit starts to rise.
Hello, I'm Dr. Christian O'Neill. Welcome to Paths to Wellness. This is a show where we provide our viewers with information regarding the wide variety of approaches to healing and wellness that are found throughout our society. You know, I've been waiting all season to do a show on homeopathy because to me it represents the quintessential alternative therapy. Detractors say that if homeopathy works at all, it functions on the level of the placebo effect. But proponents of homeopathy, like our guest today, have witnessed powerful healings that suggest otherwise. So our guest today is Dr. Stephen Weiss. He is a board-certified family physician. He's also an assistant clinical professor at the University of New Mexico School of Medicine. Dr. Weiss has completed extensive postgraduate training in complementary medicine in fields such as Ayurveda, herbology, and homeopathy. He received his degree in advanced homeopathic studies in 2004. Dr. Weiss also has an integrative and holistic practice, private practice here in Albuquerque. So thank you, Stephen, for coming. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome. It's good to be here.
Okay, so some people may not have even heard of homeopathy. So let's just start there. Just tell us what homeopathy is.
Sure. Well, I do believe it's one of the quintessential holistic medicines. It's based on the law of similars, which is that like will be cured by like, which means that when you give a substance, usually it's an animal, mineral, or vegetable substance, plant substance, to a healthy person, it creates a set of symptoms in that person, both mental, or on all planes, on all levels, mental, emotional, and physical. And that the very symptoms that are produced in those healthy people are the symptoms that can be cured by that remedy in a sick person.
Okay. So this might be an overly simplistic example, but let's just say that there was a substance that if you gave it to a healthy person produced a fever, then potentially that substance could be used by homeopathy as a fever remedy?
Correct.
Is that true? Okay.
Correct.
Okay, that makes sense. So now these remedies, but they're not working the same way as the conventional medicines. In other words, for conventional medicines, as you know, obviously you know, a lot of them are dose dependent, and it's actually a chemical reaction that is eliciting the response. Like ibuprofen, for instance, reduces inflammation, but you have to take quite a bit of it. So these the homeopathic remedies are working energetically. Is that correct?
Well, the exact mechanism of action is as of yet unknown in homeopathy. Mm-hmm. There are many theories that abound. However, because many of the remedies that I use are diluted so much that there isn't a single molecule left of the original substance. So that's something that perplexes everybody, including us as homeopaths, and even more so the detractors of homeopathy. So we believe that there must be some kind of an energetic effect on the energy body of the person. Mm-hmm. That's the belief, but there is research to actually support that the water that these remedies are made in actually hold a memory of the substance that they surround during the potentization process. So there could actually be a biochemical effect that is still being researched.
So tell me, I'm curious, how did you get interested in homeopathy?
Well, I actually grew up in Europe, grew up in Switzerland, spent half of my childhood in Geneva, Switzerland. After college, Swarthmore College, I was accepted to medical school in the States, and I was very much on the biomedical tract, into research, into randomized controlled studies, and that was my focus. I also did some research in recombinant DNA after college. But then I became sick actually in college, throughout my college years, and even right before college, and I had a form of chronic fatigue. And I struggled very much with it, and I went to many doctors and was not helped. They really didn't know what was wrong with me. And in Switzerland, before I went to medical school, I started to investigate other approaches, and I got interested in meditation, became very involved in meditation, and through that learned a great deal about alternative therapies. And one of the primary method that was used, that a number of these members of this meditation group used, was homeopathy. It was based in England, and so I traveled to England, received a complete homeopathic consultation, which definitely helped me, and actually helped me transition into medical school and complete my medical career. So that was my introduction. Then, however, I got immersed in Western medicine through medical school residency, and even went to India and met a homeopath there and had all these homeopathic books shipped back to the States, but they were just left on the shelf until I went to an American Holistic Medical Association conference and met somebody who I had met the year before, and she was just completely lit up the next year, and she had been studying homeopathy and had said it transformed her practice, and so then I went to the same lecture, a lecture by her teacher, and that was my first introduction to homeopathy, actually back in '94.
So you were satisfied that homeopathy contributed to the resolution of your chronic fatigue-like symptoms?
Yes,
Okay.
it helped. I would say it helped significantly.
Okay. And
Yes.
I can't imagine going into medical school having those symptoms. A lot of people get them during medical school.
That's why I took 2 years off, actually.
Okay.
I really wasn't ready to face it.
Okay. All right, so you mentioned the homeopathic consultation. Maybe you could tell our viewers a little bit about what that looks like.
The purpose is to really understand the patient, the individual, and to understand them on all levels. And so basically it's a lot of question and answers, but we go pretty deep into the person's history and into their state of being. And I really want to know everything I can about them. And I try to just let the person offer whatever they're ready to offer. And there's many different ways to practice homeopathy. In class, I practice what's called classical homeopathy. There are different forms of homeopathy. Classical means that it's the way Samuel Hahnemann practiced, the founder of homeopathy back in the late 1700s, early 1800s. But basically his system, the classical system, is the system where we treat the whole person with one substance. That way, it is quite scientific in that with these provings, which are when we give the remedies to healthy people, and we document in utmost detail the effects of these remedies on the organism, on the individual, and we can differentiate with very fine nuances between one remedy and the other, and sometimes there's remedies that are very close to each other and just slight nuances that distinguish them. And so once we have this huge list of all the symptoms that are produced by various thousands of homeopathic remedies. It's called the repertory. And then we also have what's called the materia medica, which is a list of each individual remedy and the symptoms that it produces in the healthy person. And with those two books, the homeopathic Bibles, we can hopefully get the information we need while speaking with the patient to match one medicine with that person. And when the match is good, it's like a key fitting into a lock, and it opens up a cascade of healing in that person.
Mm-hmm. You know, you told me, because I did have a homeopathic consultation with Dr. Weiss the other day, and we're going to get to that in just a second. But you mentioned a couple things. It's an individualized medicine, and you also mentioned to me strange, rare, and peculiar.
Yes.
Can maybe you tie those together?
I consider it to be the most individualized medicine that I've come across, because we look at so many parameters, as I mentioned, and because it's not just physical medicine, but it's looking at the mind and the mental functions and also the emotions. It looks at things that cause problems, such as like business failures. We have remedies for business failures. Mm-hmm. We have remedies for disappointed love. Depending on what caused the person's decline, let's say, or their trauma or their symptoms, what we believe to be the cause. If there's a clear-cut relationship between a life event and the subsequent development of symptoms. So we therefore, if we are able to match a person to a remedy on all these different levels, then it's extremely individualized. So that, for example, 10 different patients with pneumonia would require 10 different remedies depending on what makes their cough better or worse, what time of day their cough gets worse. If it's a yellow, thick yellow versus a different color, and so that there's sputum. And so that's how what I mean by individualized. You know. And also because we can get into such nuances about their emotional state. And the form of homeopathy that I'm starting to study now, which was popularized by Dr. Rajan Sankaran, even goes deeper. I mean, his system looks at what's called the sensation method, and we're looking at the person's experience on a deep feeling or felt sense of whatever their illness is. And when we connect with that, we can actually differentiate whether they require an animal remedy or a plant remedy or a mineral remedy, and then what family of remedies it is based on their particular experience. And you know, so it's actually going to their deepest, most felt sense of life and of like a recurring pattern that they experience in themselves.
And the remedies you would give these individuals that you're talking about would have been proven also?
Yes.
Okay.
All these remedies have been proven.
Excellent.
Yes.
So what I was about the strange, rare, and peculiar, I know just from my own training, you know, when someone would come in with allopathic medicine and they would just have a really unusual symptom, it was, you know, sometimes the allopathic approach to interviewing doesn't lend itself easily to that, but the homeopathic physician is not thrown off by that.
No, in fact, we jump for joy. It's like the red flag goes up, and it's true. I mean, it will really help enhance the prescription if it's actually something that we can find in our literature. But because it's rare and because it's unusual, and it helps us pick out the correct remedy. Yeah.
So like I mentioned, Dr. Weiss was generous enough to share his expertise with me just a couple of days, well, it was last Friday, and we had a 2.5-hour interview. It was extremely thorough. And I did have a random constellation of symptoms. I was kind of all over the map in some ways, and he was extremely patient and thorough, and we have some video for that. So let's take a look at that, and then we'll come right back.
Well, tell me what brings you in the office today.
Well, before I went to medical school, I was in the best shape of my life. I felt great. I was going to yoga every day. I had tons of energy. Med school just kind of really beat me down. And I feel tired. My thinking just isn't nearly as clear as it used to be. I have the pains in my shoulders and my elbow. Today I went to the batting cage with a friend of mine, and I just touched the bat. I rested the bat on my shoulder, and it just like hit this like shock. I was in residency. I told you how I was always taking Ambien and Seroquel to sleep. As soon as I left residency, I quit taking it the next day, and I've never taken it again. I mean, I'm one like just if you go back a little further. I mean, there's definitely been a lot of turbulence in the house. I figured that people always thought there was a lot of money in the house. At times they were right. I always thought, these people know that there's cash in this house, and it was always made me, I felt like someone was gonna break in, and I always thought I had to deal with it. And I'd be like 11 years old, and I had this baseball bat under my bed, and when it comes down to it, I just think I'm alone.
Okay, go into that feeling for a moment. If you want to, close your eyes and go into that feeling. Can you feel some emotion? Yeah? Why don't you describe what you're feeling?
I just feel sad, and just, you know, feel the tears come to my eyes a little bit, and I feel just kind of emptiness in the chest. Actually, it is kind of a physical sensation when it gets bad enough. And it does sometimes, and I've definitely felt that. It's like just right behind your breastbone, and seems like it's sorrow from being disconnected, you know, numb.
Okay, go into that sensation, if you could. Just really experience that. You doing okay?
Yeah, just pretty much kind of feel like I always do. because the numb describes it pretty good, and then like there's still that little core sadness in there. And like the thing that means the most to me, the thing I think about the most, is like being enlightened, like waking up.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a lot of people are into it. I'm one of them. You know, I'm always reading this book and going on that retreat and blah blah blah. But it occurred to me the other day, the reason really why I want it is because I've kind of given up on human relationships.
What's the emotion then about underneath that of
Desperation.
yeah?
If that's your out, then you're pretty fucking desperate. That's your out. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's not like, I mean, if you wanted to run a marathon, that would be hard.
Yeah.
And, you know, that would take a long time to train, but it's like, shit, if you think that's the only thing that's gonna save you, man, it's a long road.
Okay, so just stay with this for a moment. So let's get back just to some questions about, do you have any current fears or phobias? Dreams. Are you having any recurrent dreams? Physical issues? Any skin problems? Any ear, nose, throat problems? Are you allergic to any medications?
No.
What are your favorite things to eat or drink, just in terms of taste, enjoyment? And are you warm or chilly the way you feel in your body?
Hot.
You're hot.
Yeah.
And what weather bothers you in terms of all types of weather? Or do you
I don't like being cold.
you don't like cold weather?
Mm.
So that we would call in homeopathy an SRP, which is we call it a strange, rare, and peculiar. That will help me. The remedy that I choose, that might well be a characteristic of that remedy. What I like to do is kind of put it all together and get some of the key points, and you put it in the computer. There it is. Okay. First, we're gonna just test this point. That's strong. Okay. Yeah, that's good. That's good. Strong. Okay.
Okay, so like I said, the interview was 2.5 hours long, and it was very thorough. And then we saw in the video that there was some muscle testing. Is that commonly how you arrive at what the right remedy is?
Well, I'm fairly unique in that regard in terms of most homeopaths do not use muscle testing. And I usually use the kinesiology just to differentiate between the potencies. Once I've also just, to make sure that the remedy that I've chosen does strengthen a person's energetic field.
Mm-hmm.
And so it just is one more bit of information to support my prescription and also to help me differentiate between the potencies.
Okay, so let's talk about how long, the results that you've seen. Has there been any consistent pattern in duration?
Sure. I mean, I usually have a patient follow up in 4 to 6 weeks. And that for a chronic condition, we usually like to wait that much time. Often a person will see some changes quickly in the first few days, but sometimes it's a very subtle process. And I've had people come back, say, I didn't see any change after 4 to 6 weeks, and we've learned in homeopathy school that you then go back over the patient's chart from a month ago and you say, well, what about the abdominal pain? And they say, oh, that's gone. Oh yeah, I forgot about that. And what about the waking up at 3 o'clock? Oh yeah, I'm sleeping through the night now. So it can be extremely subtle, and only when we come back in the first follow-up and review what all the symptoms that they had, do they sometimes actually realize, oh my God, this has really worked. For an acute problem, such as a cold or a cough, I mean, we like to see a change within the first 24 to 48 hours. But for a chronic problem, we wait 4 to 6 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, is there any interaction between these homeopathic remedies and any other like conventional medical therapies, medications, or maybe even herbal stuff. For instance, I am taking some Ayurvedic stuff that a previous guest recommended to me. So is there any interaction with these remedies and other therapies?
You're going to be incredibly healthy when you're done with this show, aren't you?
Yeah.
So, well, there's no known interactions with Western medicines, as far as we know. There's some contraindications. If a person is on steroids or other heavily suppressive drugs, they can get a reaction to the homeopathy, not because it's interacting with the drug, but because it's having an opposite effect of the drug. The drug is actually suppressing the symptom, whereas homeopathy is actually trying to express the symptom and get it out from the depths of the person to push it out to the surface of the body. And actually people get skin eruptions sometimes after a homeopathic remedy, which is a good sign. And it's the body's, in its wisdom, just like the body sweats, the body purges, it knows how to get rid of things that aren't good for it. I like to tell people not to mix other energy therapies, including acupuncture, with homeopathy, because both of them are in a way, are redirecting energies. We think, I mean, we're not sure about homeopathy exactly, but that's the best theory that we have now. And so it's better to do one or the other as opposed to doing them at the same time, because the remedy, once it's in your system, it's continuing to heal you. That's why I mean, sometimes you give a remedy, I usually just give one dose of the remedy. I mean, sometimes I give multiple doses, especially if they're on medication. But oftentimes I'll just give a single dose, and if it's the right remedy, it can last for months and months, just the one dose. So it is. Therefore, if you do other energy therapies down even a week or two later, it could be affecting or altering the natural healing that's happening from the remedy.
Okay. Are there any conditions that don't lend themselves well to homeopathic intervention?
Well, funny enough, there really aren't. I mean, other than the ones that I explained where the patient has been suppressed with suppressive therapies for long periods of time, if it's an acute emergency where we have Western medical intervention that has been, that has a track record, such as heart attacks and strokes, I mean, you can give homeopathy while you're on the way to the emergency room, and it can sometimes do a lot of good. I mean, I don't do a lot of emergency medicine in my practice. I tend to, but we can read about people who had appendicitis symptoms and whose appendicitis went away en route to the ER and things like that. So it definitely has a place in acute care medicine or even emergencies. But I would get the person to an emergency room while treating them homeopathically.
Okay.
And I mean, cancer, there are people who treat cancer with homeopathy and get good results. I've treated a few people and some with good results, but it's a field that is growing, and there's not like double-blind studies supporting it, but there are a lot of case reports of people with cancer that have done well. And so it's amazing the breadth that homeopathy can help, because it's not treating the disease, it's treating the individual.
So we got just a couple minutes left. What about just one, I'm sure you have plenty of them, but is there one person that you've treated that comes to mind that really kind of demonstrates the power that you've seen with homeopathy?
The one that I just have a follow-up on is somebody that I had treated 5 years ago. She came to me with her foster mom. She was having recurrent seizures. And when she would come out of these seizures, they were happening several times a week. When she would come out of the seizure, she would be in a regressed state of a young child. She had been severely abused. She basically didn't have a life. She couldn't hold a job. She was extremely depressed, and in the office while I was taking her case, she said and I was actually asking about the trauma that had occurred. Her eyes rolled back, and she had a seizure in my office. I went, and I had been working up her case at the time, and so there was a remedy that I was considering, but she was unconscious, and so I couldn't give it to her under her tongue. But I've learned that you can have the patient sniff the remedy. So I took the remedy and had her sniff it, and she came out of the seizure in a few seconds, much, much more rapidly than she usually does. And she normally would stay in that regressed state for up to 2 days. And she got out of that state within a few, I think less than a minute, or a brief period of time. And then she kept taking the remedy, and she has not had seizures for 5 years. So that, completely cured her seizures.
Wow. All
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Great. Well, this is a very big topic. This is one of the topics that I'm sorry our show's a half hour. We could talk about this for a long time. But before we go, if people were interested in working with you, what would be the best way for them to reach you?
They can either call my office at 505-87, well, locally in Albuquerque, it's 872-2611, or they can check my website, which is holisticmedicineheals.com, and holistic is HOLISTIC, medicine heals, HEALS.com.
Okay.
Yeah.
And in addition to being just a real gentleman and a fine doctor, Dr. Weiss writes beautifully too.
Oh.
So go to his website and check out his articles. They're really fantastic. They are.
Thank you.
So great. Thanks so much for coming down and sharing with us. We appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks a lot, Christian.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's time for Desert Island Books. If you were stuck on a desert island and you had all of your essentials taken care of, food, water, shelter, clothing, and you had some room for some luxury items, these are books you'd want to have with you. This week we're doing Grace and Grit by Ken and Treya Wilbur. Ken Wilbur is the very smart, very bald, reluctant guru from Boulder, and Treya was his wife. And Ken's written a bunch of books about spirituality, but this is a real departure. This is a book that's written by both of them, and it was about her battle with breast cancer back in the mid-'80s, which she lost. It doesn't ruin the book to know that. Anyway, this book, Ken writes part of it, and then the other part are excerpts from Treya's diary, and it's just an extraordinary book. It's great on a bunch of levels. It's a great spiritual book. Ken and Treya were both long-term meditators, and they have a lot to say about spirituality. It also does talk about complementary versus conventional medical therapy, because she took chemotherapy and she did some alternative therapies, and this was 25 years ago, but it's still relevant. But it's also just a wonderful relationship book. As a matter of fact, it's the best one I've ever read. It's just a beautiful story. So it's Grace and Grit by Ken and Treya Wilbur. Highly recommend this book. Thanks. First of all, I want to thank Dr. Weiss for coming on the show. I want to thank John, the producer. He's the other half of Paths to Wellness. I want to thank the crew, Colleen and Ivy, and thank the studio for giving us the airtime. Most of all, I want to thank the viewers. If you're enjoying the show, check us out next week. You can come visit us online at pathstowellness.net. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, you can send them to me at dro@pathstowellness.net. So before we go, we'd like to leave you with something to chew on. We call it the Cud. This week's Cud comes from Tony Parsons, who wrote, "To free people from the idea that they suffer is the greatest compassion." So thanks a lot for watching. Until next week, remember, it's your body, learn to care for it. It's your mind, learn to focus it. It's your heart, learn to awaken it. Peace.
Keep on opening doors. Let the past pour out your pores. You cast hopeful oars. Man.
Okay. I thought we were going to talk about my shoulders only.